Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. She had just buried her husband, a quiet man who had been her anchor for 40 years. The grief was a heavy cloak she wore daily, but she had always found solace in her daughter, Sarah. Sarah, her only child, had been her world. Now, in the raw aftermath of loss, Sarah was her reason for getting up in the morning. Or so she thought. Sarah and her husband, Mark, had been living with her for the past year, ever since their own financial troubles mounted. Eleanor had welcomed them, happy for the company in her large, quiet home, and eager to help her daughter get back on her feet. She'd paid off Sarah's car loan, helped Mark with some business debts, and covered most of their living expenses. It felt natural, her duty as a mother. But what she discovered next would force her to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. Eleanor was a woman in her late 60s, her movements still graceful despite the weariness grief etched on her face. Her home, a 2-story colonial, was paid for, filled with the memories of a lifetime. Her savings were modest but secure, enough to live comfortably and leave something for Sarah. She had always been generous, believing that family should help each other without question. Her parents had instilled that in her, and she had raised Sarah with the same principle. Sarah, in her late 30s, was vibrant but perpetually in crisis mode, always needing something: money for a bill, help with a problem, a place to stay. Mark, quiet and often sullen, seemed content to let Sarah handle their interactions with Eleanor. Eleanor loved her daughter fiercely, and that love had often blinded her to Sarah's less admirable traits: a tendency towards entitlement, a lack of follow-through, a quick temper when she didn't get her way. But they were family. Family was everything. One evening, about a month after the funeral, Sarah and Mark were in the kitchen. Unaware Eleanor was sitting just out of sight in the adjoining sunroom, normally her quiet reading spot. They were discussing finances, their voices low at first, then rising in frustration. "She's so slow," Sarah muttered, agitation clear in her tone. "It's like she doesn't understand we need this house." Mark's voice was flat. "She's grieving, Sarah. Give it time." "Time?" Sarah scoffed. "We don't have time. That bankruptcy is still hanging over us. We need the equity in this place now." "She's not going to sell, you know that," Mark said. "She loves this house. Then she can move into some little apartment." "It's not like she needs all this space," Sarah retorted, her voice hardening. "We could clear so much from the sale. Enough to pay off everything and have a decent down payment somewhere else." Eleanor felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Sell? They wanted her to sell her home? The home she had shared with her husband, where Sarah had grown up. Maybe we could talk to her about a reverse mortgage?" Mark suggested hesitantly. Sarah let out a sharp laugh. "Are you serious? And watch our inheritance disappear little by little? No way. Better she just, quickly." There was a pause. Eleanor's heart pounded. What did quickly mean? Mark sighed. "She's healthy, Sarah. She could live for 20 more years." "Ugh," Sarah groaned, loud enough that Eleanor flinched. 20 years? We can't wait 20 years. I swear, she's being deliberately difficult. Why won't she just see sense? Why won't she just die? I don't give a shit anymore." The words hung in the air, sharp and brutal. Eleanor froze, every cell in her body reeling. Her daughter, her only child, wished she would die. Didn't give a shit. Not about her pain, her grief, her presence, only about the house, the money. The knot in her stomach twisted into a hard, painful stone. This wasn't just thoughtless frustration, it was cold, calculated desire. A desire fueled by greed. She stayed hidden, silent, until she heard them leave the kitchen. Only then did she move, her legs shaky. She didn't confront them. She couldn't. The shock was too profound. She went to her bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly ahead. Her daughter wished she were dead. It wasn't just about money. It was a complete absence of love, of care, of basic human decency towards her own mother. The grief for her husband was still there, but now it was joined by a searing new pain, the pain of ultimate betrayal. The next morning, Eleanor acted as if nothing had happened. The conversation echoed in her mind, a constant, sickening refrain, but she didn't let it show. She made breakfast, smiled weakly, and listened as Sarah complained about her job and Mark talked about his business struggles. They were acting completely normal, utterly unaware that their private words had shattered Eleanor's world. The depth of their deception, the casual cruelty, was staggering. It solidified something in Eleanor. This wasn't just adult children struggling. This was calculated exploitation. They weren't looking for help. They were looking for an inheritance while she was still alive to manipulate. Her initial shock began to give way to a cold, quiet resolve. She had to protect herself. She couldn't live under the same roof with people who wished her dead for her assets. But she couldn't just kick them out. They might retaliate. They might try to claim she was unstable, incompetent. She needed proof. She needed a plan. The first step was small but crucial. She went into her husband's old study, a room she hadn't spent much time in since he passed, and found his lockbox. Inside were important papers, the deed to the house, car titles, the original will. She added her own jewelry and a few irreplaceable photos. She didn't trust them not to snoop. She took the lockbox and hid it deep in her bedroom closet, under a pile of blankets, behind some old suitcases. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A small, defiant act of self-preservation. Eleanor began observing Sarah and Mark more closely. Their constant financial crises seemed less like emergencies and more like deliberate drains on her resources. A sudden car repair needed cash immediately. A looming eviction notice required a large sum right now. Each request was accompanied by heavy sighs, tales of hardship, and thinly veiled guilt trips. If only we had a little help, Mom, we could get back on our feet, but I guess we'll just have to figure it out. Followed by sad looks. Eleanor, numb from the shock of their true feelings, found it easier to say she didn't have access to funds right that second, or she needed to check with her bank. Her vague responses frustrated them. Mom, did you call the bank about that money yet? Sarah asked one morning, her tone sharp. Mark needs it today. I need to go in person, Eleanor said slowly, improvising. The online system is confusing. It wasn't confusing at all. She just needed time. She started keeping a small notebook hidden in her purse. In it, she jotted down dates, times, and the nature of their requests. October 14th, Sarah asked for $1,500 for car repair. Showed estimate. Said needed cash today. October 18th, Mark asked for $3,000 for business supplies. Vague about what? Said urgent. She noted their reactions when she hesitated or declined. The sulking, the passive aggression, the sudden coldness. One afternoon, while Sarah was out and Mark was supposedly looking for work, Eleanor carefully searched Sarah's room. She felt guilty, like a spy in her own home, but the memory of Sarah's cruel words propelled her forward. She found stacks of bills and collection notices hidden in a drawer, far worse than they had ever admitted. They weren't just struggling, they were drowning in debt they hadn't disclosed. She photographed the documents with her phone, her hands trembling slightly. Then she found something else, a series of text messages on an old tablet Sarah had seemingly forgotten. They were between Sarah and Mark. Sarah, she's still dragging her feet. I don't know what to do. Mark, patience. She's old, she's grieving. She'll make a mistake. We just need to be ready. Sarah, ready for what? What if she lives for ages? I can't wait. Mark, we have options. Maybe we can prove she's not capable anymore? Old people get confused. Might be easier to get a power of attorney, handle things ourselves. Sarah, you think? How? Mark, talk to my cousin, the paralegal. He knows this stuff. Says once we have control, we can make decisions about assets. Sell the house, pay us back for managing her affairs. It's standard. Just need to show she's losing it. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. They weren't just waiting for her to die. They were actively plotting to declare her incompetent, to take control of her life and her assets legally. The idea of proving she was losing it terrified her. They could lie, manipulate doctors, twist her grief into evidence of instability. This was no longer just about money. It was about her autonomy, her dignity, her very identity. With the photos of the texts and the hidden bills, Eleanor knew she needed professional help immediately. She couldn't go to a local lawyer, not yet. She worried Sarah or Mark might have connections, might find out she was seeking advice. Using a hidden browser window on her computer when they were both out, she searched for elder law attorneys in a neighboring town, about an hour away. She found one with good reviews, a woman named Ms. Ramirez, and scheduled a confidential consultation under her maiden name. The drive felt surreal. She was planning against her own daughter. But the cold, hard truth of the text messages was a constant reminder of what she was up against. Ms. Ramirez was kind, sharp, and direct. Eleanor laid everything out: her husband's death, Sarah and Mark living with her, their financial demands, the overheard conversation, the hidden bills, and finally, the text messages about declaring her incompetent and getting power of attorney. Ms. Ramirez listened patiently, her expression serious. When Eleanor finished, the lawyer nodded. This is textbook financial elder abuse, coupled with potential intent to commit fraud and unlawful confinement or guardianship. Your daughter and son-in-law see you as an obstacle and a resource, not as a person they love and respect. The lawyer explained Eleanor's options. First, securing her assets and property was paramount. That meant reviewing her will, potentially setting up a trust, and making sure her financial accounts were protected. Second, she needed to establish clear boundaries and legal safeguards against them trying to declare her incompetent. This could involve getting a letter from her doctor attesting to her capacity, or even preemptively filing something with the court about their actions. Third, getting them out of her house would require a formal eviction process, which Ms. Ramirez could handle. Do not tell them you've spoken to me, Ms. Ramirez stressed. Any action you take now needs to be strategic and quiet. They must not suspect you're onto them until you are ready to act decisively. Continue documenting everything. Every request, every interaction, every overheard word. If they make any threats, even veiled ones, write them down immediately. Eleanor left Ms. Ramirez's office feeling a sense of grim purpose. The fear hadn't dissipated entirely, but it was now channeled into action. She wasn't helpless, she had options, and she had an ally. She would follow the lawyer's advice to the letter. Back home, she downloaded a recording app onto her phone and learned how to use it discreetly. She kept it on silent vibrate in her pocket during interactions with Sarah and Mark. Most conversations were mundane, but she caught snippets, complaints about her slow decision-making, muttered frustrations about money, resentful comments about her house being theirs someday anyway. One evening, Sarah cornered her in the living room. "Mom, seriously, about the house. Have you thought about selling? Mark found some lovely condos that would be perfect for you. Small, easy to manage." "Sarah, we've talked about this." "I'm not selling my home," Eleanor said, her voice firm but quiet. Sarah's face hardened. "But why not? You don't need all the space. We could really use the money. It would solve all our problems." "This is my home," Eleanor repeated, feeling a tremor of fear but standing her ground. "Your father and I built our life here. I am not selling." Sarah's voice rose, losing its persuasive edge and becoming sharp with entitlement. "So you're just going to be selfish? After everything we're going through, we're your family. This is our inheritance anyway. You're just keeping it from us." Eleanor felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she remembered Ms. Ramirez's advice. Stay calm, observe. It is my property, Sarah. And I am still alive. What I choose to do with it is my decision. This is unbelievable. Sarah practically shouted. You're supposed to help us, not hoard everything. What are you even saving it for? You're old. What do you need it for? You'll be dead soon anyway. Eleanor simply looked at her, her expression unreadable. Sarah, perhaps realizing she had gone too far, visibly bristled. Fine. Be that way. See if we help you when you're really old and need help, she stormed off, leaving Eleanor trembling but also strangely empowered. Sarah had just admitted, unequivocally, that their help was transactional, contingent on Eleanor giving them her assets. And the veiled threat about needing help later was a chilling reminder of what could happen if she didn't comply. The recording light on her phone was still on. She took the recording to Ms. Ramirez. The lawyer listened, her face grim. That's strong evidence of emotional abuse and financial coercion. The comment about not helping you later can be interpreted as a form of abandonment threat to manipulate you now. Based on the mounting evidence, the texts, the bills, the recordings of their demands and threats, Ms. Ramirez advised Eleanor to take definitive legal steps. First, they would draft and execute a new will and establish a trust, clearly outlining who would inherit what, under specific conditions, and importantly, placing restrictions that would prevent Sarah and Mark from immediately accessing or squandering large sums. The house was placed in a trust with Eleanor retaining a life estate. She would live there for as long as she wished, and upon her death, specific terms would govern its disposition, making it much harder for Sarah and Mark to force a quick sale or take unfettered control. Second, Ms. Ramirez drafted formal letters to Sarah and Mark. One was a cease and desist, demanding they stop their financial demands and threats. The other was a legal notice regarding the changes to Eleanor's estate plan, clarifying that their future inheritance was contingent on their behavior and could be forfeited. This was the legal weapon. Ms. Ramirez advised Eleanor not to serve the papers herself. They hired a process server. The element of surprise, delivered by a neutral third party, would be crucial. In the meantime, Eleanor continued her quiet preparations. She opened a new bank account at a different bank branch they didn't know about and gradually began transferring most of her liquid savings, leaving just enough in the old account for daily expenses to avoid immediate suspicion. She changed all her online banking passwords and set up two-factor authentication. She installed a small, discreet security camera system, advised by Ms. Ramirez, covering the main entry points and living areas, citing vague concerns about break-ins in the neighborhood. Sarah and Mark remained oblivious. They were increasingly frustrated by Eleanor's subtle resistance, attributing it to grief or stubbornness. They continued their subtle pressure, assuming she was too timid or too unintelligent to truly stand against them. This overconfidence was their crucial mistake. They believed they had all the power, that her age and grief made her vulnerable and pliable. They couldn't conceive that the quiet woman they saw as a cash cow was meticulously building a case against them. One crisp autumn morning, the process server arrived. Eleanor had arranged to be out, staying at a friend's house for the day on the pretext of helping her with something. She received a text from her friend when the server confirmed delivery. Sarah and Mark were caught completely off guard. Eleanor returned home later that afternoon. The atmosphere was thick with shock and fury. Sarah's face was red, contorted with rage. Mark stood beside her, pale but with hard eyes. The legal documents lay on the kitchen counter, stark white against the granite. "What is this, Mom?" Sarah shrieked, snatching up the papers. "What did you do?" Eleanor walked past them calmly, placing her purse on the hall table. She felt a strange sense of detachment, the culmination of weeks of suppressed emotion and methodical planning. "It's exactly what it says, Sarah. Legal notice. regarding my property and my will. You changed the will? Mark exclaimed, shock warring with anger. You cut us out. I secured my assets, Eleanor corrected, her voice steady. Based on the advice of my attorney. Sarah threw the papers down. Attorney? You got an attorney. What are you talking about? Why would you do this? Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. The mask of the needy daughter had completely fallen away, revealing the entitled manipulator beneath. I got an attorney, Eleanor said, walking into the living room and sitting down, gesturing to a stack of files on the coffee table, because I discovered you were planning to declare me incompetent and take control of my life and property. Sarah gasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. That's a lie. Is it? Eleanor asked softly, picking up her phone. I have recordings, Sarah. Of you and Mark discussing how to prove I'm losing it, of you wishing I would just die so you could have the house. Of you saying you don't give a shit about me. She saw the color drain from Sarah's face. I have text messages between you and Mark detailing your plans. I have records of the debts you hid from me, the emergencies that were just paying off your bankruptcy. I have documentation of every penny I've given you over the past year. You spied on us? Mark stammered, looking cornered. This is my home, Eleanor said. I was protecting myself. You weren't living here as loving family. You were living here as predators, waiting for me to be weak enough to exploit or die fast enough for your convenience. Sarah began to cry, but it wasn't grief. It was the desperate wails of someone caught and cornered. Mom, you can't do this. We're your family. You can't believe those things. I believe the evidence, Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. And your words. Just I don't give a shit. Do you think I could ever forget that? Do you think I could ever feel safe around you again? But the house. The money. Mark pleaded, his voice losing its bluster. Is secure, Eleanor finished. In a trust. Administered by an independent trustee upon my death. You will receive a small allowance under very strict conditions, provided you make a genuine effort to get your lives in order. The bulk will go to charities I support, or potentially to my nieces and nephews, who, unlike you, have never treated me with such cruelty and disrespect. Sarah wailed louder. You can't do this. This is ours. Dad wanted us to have it. Your father trusted me to make the right decisions, Eleanor said. And he would be heartbroken and disgusted by your behavior. Your actions have ensured you will inherit almost nothing, she gestured to another document. Ms. Ramirez has also prepared an eviction notice. You have 30 days to leave. After that, the sheriff will escort you out. Do not damage my property. Do not remove anything that does not belong to you. The security cameras are recording. The reality of their situation slammed into Sarah and Mark. The endless supply of money was cut off. The planned inheritance was gone. They were being kicked out. Their manipulation had backfired spectacularly. Panic set in, replaced by desperate attempts at guilt and false reconciliation. Mom, please. We were just stressed. We didn't mean it. We love you. Sarah sobbed, trying to approach her. Eleanor held up a hand. Stop. Your actions and your words have shown me the truth of your feelings. There is nothing left for you here. Pack your things. The truth of their attempted manipulation quickly spread through the extended family, fueled by Eleanor's calm explanation and, later, the existence of the evidence. Most family members were shocked and sided with Eleanor, appalled by Sarah and Mark's greed. Some, who had perhaps suspected something was amiss, offered quiet support. A few distant relatives, Sarah's flying monkeys, tried to pressure Eleanor to keep the peace and forgive her daughter, but Eleanor, fortified by legal counsel and her own resolve, politely but firmly shut them down. The month that followed was tense, but relatively quiet. Sarah and Mark, facing the undeniable legal documents and the threat of being forcibly removed, packed their belongings. Their desperation was palpable, but Eleanor maintained a dignified distance, communicating only through written notes or brief, factual exchanges. She had her friend stay with her some nights, and Ms. Ramirez was just a phone call away. On the 30th day, they left. Eleanor watched from her window as they loaded their car, the air heavy with defeat. They didn't look back. After they were gone, Eleanor walked through her quiet house. It felt clean again, free from the weight of their resentment and greed. She sat in her living room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of her own things she had fought to keep. There was no victory dance, no triumphant celebration. Just a profound sense of relief and a quiet, hard-won peace. The relationship with her daughter was broken, perhaps irrevocably. But Eleanor was safe. Her home was her own. Her future, diminished by the betrayal but not destroyed, was secure. She had stood up for herself, not with shouting or drama, but with quiet strength, strategic planning, and the truth. She had faced down manipulation and won, not by getting revenge, but by protecting her peace and her dignity. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.